So thank you for joining the second Grab the Mic live, and a massive thank you to Sanita, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. So I'm Vic Elizabeth Turnbull, and I'm the founder of Mic Media, and we are a podcast production and training social enterprise. We predominantly work with other good eggs, so people across the social impact sector. And the idea of Grab the Mic Live is simple. There are loads of not-for-profit organizations, people, folk, whatever, that are creating amazing podcasts. And we want to shout about them by profiling them in twice monthly live conversations. So you can learn from other not-for-profit podcasters about how they're creating podcasts to either start to grab the mic and create your own, or tickle up the one you've already got. So happy to have Sanita Guddu on the second Grab the Mic Live. And she is the founder, host, queen bee of the Legacy Fundraising Chat podcast. Sanita, thank you for joining us on this wonderful Tuesday. So we're going to chat a lot about how amazing you were in getting your podcast to launch, from idea to launch in just 4 months. But before all that, let's have a chat about what your day job is, because it's not just podcasting, is it?
No, actually, podcasting is a very small part of my work. Day job, it's really strange. I never think of what I do as a job. It's probably because I enjoy it so much. It's just a joy, really. So I started as a fundraiser back in 2005. I'm not going to talk about 17 years in full, but yeah, just to give you a bit of background, really, I guess where I kind of started my humble beginnings as a fundraiser, doing community events, corporate events, fundraising. And in 2008, I came across Legacy Fundraising and I fell in love. And there was something about this way of giving. There was something around the marketing that I just felt, this is home to me. And so I took on a challenge of being the first legacy manager for a national charity who had never done any strategy work, hadn't done anything with legacies, but they had a very supportive board, which is pretty much all I needed. And I learned the hard way. I learned writing my own strategy, presenting in front of a whole board, which was quite a terrifying experience, 15, 17 years ago. And I learned to do everything. I have used every channel going for legacies: telephone, face-to-face, digital, social, DM. And from there is really where I decided this is something I really want to do more of with more organizations. And we all know we can only work for one organization at a time, because when you work in charities, it's busy, right? You can't spread yourself out. So that's where Persuasion was born, my consultancy, in 2019.
And so the podcast then, Legacy Fundraising Chat, why did that feel like the next step for Persuasion Consultancy?
So as I was delivering training, as I was talking to lots of fundraisers and doing lots of strategy work, it felt that there was this common thing coming out, that there wasn't one place to get those kind of basics around legacies. And there were people who were making the mistakes that I was making, because if we don't know any better, we carry on doing what we've kind of always done. And for me, the passion of starting Persuasion was to access those very small charities, those medium-sized charities who can't go to London for those events and just needed that kind of guidance. So having these continual kind of like messages throughout, I thought, how can I actually make a bigger impact? And I felt, right, the podcast just felt like a natural thing. I thought, well, if I can just talk, not at people, but if I can talk into a mic, which I can do very well, and then actually share this, then people can listen as of when it resonates with them. And I think this probably leads a little bit onto how I discovered you. And that was really my drive in terms of I just wanted more charities, more fundraisers to learn what I learned, but not have to do it the hard way. Yeah.
That's quite generous of you, isn't it? So you run a consultant. This is your bread and butter. This is where you get paid. But you're willing to offer your advice in a bite-sized way for free. That's accessible, and that smaller charities can take advantage of.
It's interesting you say that, because I have had clients say, Sanita, you give so much away in your episode. You literally tell charities how they could be doing it. I'm not a big fan of telling. I'm a big fan of showing and giving options, because I think every charity is unique, and I don't agree with plagiarism, and what works for one charity isn't going to work for another. But I do give all the information that I have available at my disposal. And I suppose, yes, I do that because I want to. And it's totally okay if I don't get clients. I mean, I have had clients come from it, but if clients don't approach me, it's potential clients, it's actually okay, because as long as they get out what I want to put in. And the time when people stop listening, or people say, actually, Sanita, what you're doing is actually not worthwhile, is the time that I'll stop. But having fundraisers approach me and tell me that they've actually changed their whole strategy based on the episodes that they've listened, it actually really inspires me. And so it's great, and it's there. That's what it's there for. It's a resource. And I guess the other thing is, this sector I feel has been very good to me. So it's my way of giving back. And I think that's really important, because everybody gives more time than they get paid for anyway. So I think that's just the nature of the third sector.
Absolutely, it is. And I suppose it's also that expert positioning piece as well. That solidifying your voice of authority within legacy fundraising. And what better way to do that than with a podcast?
And it's good for me, because it actually helps me to work out the rationale. So sometimes we can all just get very stuck into doing what we're doing because we've always done it. But with each episode, I'm giving reasons. Why would you start a conversation like this with a supporter versus not starting a conversation in a different way? And it's really helped my thinking, actually, to try and actually help my clients as well. So I feel that as a result, I'm actually a better consultant because of the podcast, because I'm thinking things in a lot more detail than I would ordinarily. And it's really quite interesting, because I completely break things down right into the nitty gritty. For example, I've recorded an episode on, is fear holding you back from having legacy conversations? It's something that's never talked about in the sector, because we're all expected to be super confident and extroverts and great at this, aren't we? When actually, most people are introverts, and there's very few kind of extroverts. So it's kind of tapping into that and acknowledging that we are very different, and there's things that we need to uncover in ourselves in order to be better at what we do. But that's some soul searching that I had to do myself, because I actually had those fears. And I think it's helpful for other fundraisers to see, actually, you can go from being absolutely terrified of talking to somebody face to face about legacies and go to an auditorium and speak to 2,000 people, which doesn't faze me at all. In fact, it actually excites me these days to be able to do that.
Isn't that great though? And an unexpected outcome of your podcast is that it's helping develop your professional practice as well.
Yeah, well, it's got to make me better. So for me, it's always about quality content, and I will work on an episode until I've got it to a point where I actually feel a fundraiser is going to get something really meaningful out of it. And that's why each episode ends with the takeaways. And if I can't explain the takeaways in a couple of minutes, then I don't feel like I've actually done a very good job with the episode. So I need to be able to. And that's not a hint at all of you to listen to just the end. You need to listen to all of the episode, because like I said, the rationale is in there as well. You want to know why you're doing what you're doing is the thing.
I love that, how when you're making the podcast, you're considering your listener. Like, will my listener get anything out of it? Is this useful? And then re-looking it and going, I'll do it again. I'll refigure it out. That's key, yeah, I think.
Exactly.
Now, when you first had the idea for the podcast, you wanted to do it yourself. You wanted to learn how you wanted to learn how to do it yourself, didn't you?
Yeah.
And you're actually one of my workshop participants. Sounds like it's a really dry way of explaining of describing you. You came to one of my podcast workshops.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to do it yourself rather than someone else do it for you?
Well, I think it becomes about what you were saying about the voice of authority, in that I do know a lot about legacy fundraising, but I know nothing. Well, at the time, I knew nothing about podcasting, apart from the fact that I love to listen to podcasts, and I listen to a lot of them. So I guess there was that thing of, I have the content, I just don't have the know-how. And I thought, if I can get the know-how, then I can deliver the content. But interestingly, when you said do it myself, initially when I had the idea to do the podcast, I was actually going to launch with 2 other legacy managers. And at the time, we were very much involved in the discussions. Then actually they got very busy and then said, oh, let's come back. And then as time unfolded, they were very much, oh, Sanita, why don't you just do it yourself? You know, you've got all the knowledge there, and we can kind of support you. And I guess it goes back to that thing of what I was talking about, that fear of feeling, actually, I don't know how to do something, but that's not a reason not to do something. There's always somebody, an expert, who can show you. And I suppose that's exactly what I'm doing on the podcast. The people are listening because they're looking for, I guess, skills, tips, and I'm able to impart with that knowledge. And I guess that was very much with you, Vic, in terms of I needed an expert. I didn't need another legacy person. I was the legacy person. And it actually took other people to address that with me and say, Sanita, you actually don't need us. You can so do this.
That's fab. Doing it on your own and getting on with it. So from, I think you came on my masterclass workshop in January this year.
January, yeah.
And then when did you launch your podcast?
I launched on the 12th of April. So yeah, was it exactly maybe 4 months or something like that? I think possibly could have been. That wasn't intentional at all. And I think initially when I'd done the training with you, I was actually thinking about launching in the summer. And when I looked at the enormity of what needed to be learned by me, because I didn't feel equipped at all. But actually, having then gone through your kind of checklist and the steps, I was finding I was working through this quite quickly. And I think the thing that really helped me was knowing that I knew what to say. And so I think one of the things that we talked about was, you said, Sanita, go away and think of, brainstorm and find 20 episodes that you could talk about and do topics on. Well, I came up with 50. And then I thought to myself, this is 2.5 years worth of content if I was to release fortnightly. So I think that was the drive for me, because I thought, why am I delaying this? Now, of course, I can find the right headphones They don't have to be white, but they just happen to be white because I quite like these. But and then I realized, actually, I'm just stalling. And you showed me what I needed to do. So it was a case of just get on and do it, really.
I hear that so often. People getting in their own way. And thinking about, excuses. I'm the same. I'm absolutely the same. I'm like, oh, can't do it because this. And then sometimes you just need someone to give you a kick up the bum, don't you? And go, well, this is how you do it. Do it. And you really took the advice and just went for it. And what was one of the first things that you did then to take that leap into creating your podcast, to get out of that funk, I suppose?
Yes. So I did the brainstorm, and then that really ignited a fire in me, and I thought, I need to get this information out, because I just thought, well, being a legacy fundraiser, I'm very much aware of my own mortality. I change my will every few years. So, I'm very much aware that this could happen at any time. So I was kind of this thing of, I want to get this out. I want this to be my legacy, I guess, in a way. So after having done that, I thought, right, what's the name going to be? Because I remember just working through your checklist, and I came up with a name in 5 seconds. It was so obvious. It was going to be about legacies. It's going to be fundraising, and we're going to talk. And so, that's it. Legacy Fundraising Chat was born. There was no major work that was done with that, really. The logo, I spent way too much time over, and anyone that's listening, please take lessons from how I went through this. So I think the thing is, when we have a vision and we cannot explain it, be prepared for the fact that no one can create it for you. And I have this thing of, if I can't explain it, no one can create it. It's very different with my existing brand, which is Persuasion. It's very clear. I can explain what it's about. It's very warm, it's orange, etc. The colors, and it's very creative. It's how I work with my clients, very creative way. But I had something in my head for Legacy Fundraising Chat that I just could not verbalize. And so I sent out this brief to a couple of designers, came back with something that I really didn't like, but not their fault, because it was my misunderstanding. I'm thinking, well, why do you not get it? Why do you not know what I'm trying to, and I think that's the thing about being very, very clear about what you want it to look like, what it needs to convey, giving examples, which is very interesting, because my Persuasion logo actually didn't take that long to do, because essentially it's 3 people sitting around a table, and it represents myself, the client, my charity client, and the supporter, and this is how we kind of like work together. So it's not persuasion in a manipulative way, it's persuasion as in we're all working together to kind of like to get to the same thing, because we're all trying to in some way persuade each other that we should be providing a particular service, or supporting somebody in a particular way. So I guess that's my kind of thing I want to part with in terms of the logo, is don't get too bogged down with it, but just be very clear about when sending out to a designer.
I think also clear on so there's 3 things, isn't there, that we as podcast listeners, some of the 3 main things that we choose a podcast over the next podcast. There's name, the artwork, and the podcast description. All those 3 things are things that will go, oh, that looks interesting. Oh, I'll listen to that. Oh, let me subscribe to that. Yeah. And so Legacy Fundraising Chat does exactly what it says on the tin. There's no clever nonsense.
No, I don't try to be clever with words. I just say as it is, because everyone's really clear then, and that's what legacy fundraising is about. Is about being very transparent with your supporters, and that should be throughout, really. So that's me. Yeah, definitely direct.
And if we think about people searching that as well in on their podcast players, they're going to be searching legacy fundraising, and yours is more likely to show at the top. So
yeah, I think mine is the only one that's going to show at the top, which is great.
And that's brilliant as well in that whole thing about finding your niche.
Yeah.
And did you do any sort of competitor
I
analysis
did,
at the beginning?
because it wasn't so much a competitor analysis, because I don't see competitors. I work so collaboratively with so many other consultants and legacy consultants as well, and some are going to be coming on the show, so there's definitely no competition. But what I wanted to see was, is there another legacy fundraising podcast out there? Because if there was, and somebody was doing what I was planning on doing, I wouldn't be doing this podcast. Because I'd be thinking, well, that's being given, that audience is being served, but I couldn't find it. I looked in the States, I looked in the UK. Europe hasn't really developed their legacy fundraising. I mean, there are some national charities within Europe that have, but there was nothing. So that's really where I felt it was a necessity, really, more than anything else. But yeah, if I could have found a legacy fundraising I mean, there's things that allude to the quest, which is obviously very Americanized, but there isn't one just around legacy fundraising. And the UK market is very different to the American market. And even though there are charity fundraising podcasts, and they do have the odd episode about legacies, for example, I've been on Charity Chat to talk about legacies as well, it wasn't purely talking to the legacy fundraiser who has to wear so many hats and has actually quite a painful job trying to justify their existence.
I suppose then my next question is about content, because some of my advice when speaking to people who are starting their podcast is to be specific in what your podcast is about. So fundraising, massive. Legacy fundraising, smaller. And you already said that you thought about 50 ideas.
Yeah.
Do you reckon you could think of another 50 ideas?
Oh, I've already done the exercise again since. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've done it again. I've got 100. I mean, I've just released episode 13. So, but I mean, this will be continual. There's new ideas that are coming to me all the time, and there's stuff that my clients are doing, and there's stuff that I'm experimenting with my clients, and all that I'm going to be feeding into the podcast, and that's what it's there for, is to share.
I'm going to play a little clip of it in a second.
Okay.
I just want to talk about kit and equipment. I love them. They're very fetching. How was that? Because that's a stumbling block for a lot of people. What kit? So what do you use?
So I obviously have these. I have an external microphone, which is it a snowball you call them, where you can take it off the it's kind of the other side of the room at the moment, but yeah, I mean, I have had guests feel quite intimidated when all my kit's out, and it's okay. It's because I want quality sound. Obviously their sound doesn't have to be as quality, but yeah, I think we talked about basics, didn't we? And we said an external mic, overhead headphones, and that's pretty much. And then there's the editing software, which I've got. So really just 3 very basic things. Yeah, I'm ready to go.
And your podcast does sound quality. It's well recorded. Using 3 fundamental, 3 things to make a podcast, which and then the 4th one is the thing that you're storing your recording onto. And there you go. There's no massively fancy stuff that you need, is there really?
It can be as easy as hard, I think, as anybody wants to make it, really
absolutely
is. So yeah, it's the kit really shouldn't hold anybody back from thinking, oh, what am I going to buy? And so inexpensive as well. So I pretty much just went on to good old Amazon, and just looked at various mics, looked at headphones, just looked at reviews, and just made sure that the people that had left the reviews were using them for podcasts, because that's quite important in terms of the sound.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much, and I guess I mean the fun bits. Those were fun bits. I mean, the whole thing is fun, but the fun bits were finding my soundtrack. You know, I really enjoyed listening to all this music and stuff that people have created. So that was really good fun. And again,
my favorite bit of making a podcast is finding the music.
Great, isn't it? And again, it can be easy or as difficult as you want it to be. And I mentioned the music because it's such an important part of the brand, the recognition. And I really wanted people to feel uplifted when they listen to my podcast, which is why I chose the music that I did.
And what a lovely link that was, Sanita. It was like it was planned. I'm going to play a little bit of your podcast now. This is from the latest episode. Sanita, because you're the only person here, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear it? That'd be marvelous. And just to remind people that are listening, we are open for questions, and we'll be taking them towards the end. So whether you're listening on Twitter or watching, on Twitter or LinkedIn, then you've got a chance to ask your questions to either myself or Sanita as well. So let's have a listen at this, shall we? Oh no, it's not that one. That's next time. Hang on a minute.
Welcome to Legacy Fundraising Chat, where I talk about everything legacy related to help you as a fundraiser generate more interest amongst your supporters in legacy giving. I'm your host, Sanita Guddu, founder of Persuasion and a legacy marketer, providing consultancy, training, coaching, and interim support to charities of all sizes. Welcome to episode 13, What Legacy Materials Do You Really Need? Over the last 17 years, I've seen a plethora of legacy materials ranging from the traditional legacy leaflet, a brochure, coasters, bookmarks, posters, and the list goes on. But what if you just want to kickstart your legacy program and you're getting bombarded with ideas of what materials to produce, and do any of them work anyway? That's what we're going to uncover in today's episode. When I'm working with a prospective client, I'm often given a brief to create a number of legacy materials. But often charities are unsure how to use these materials effectively. This may be because they have seen other charities producing an ammunition of legacy stuff and feel that they need to do that too. Or I've also witnessed the opposite.
How do you feel listening back to your voice? Are you okay with it?
I'm totally okay with it. I think in the early days it was a bit difficult, but I've got over myself now and just realized actually other people are going to listen to it. So I need to listen to it. And even though I have someone that does my editing, it's absolutely important that I have complete sign off on it. So I will listen to the whole episode when I actually sign it off. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's important that you have to get used to your voice pretty fast, don't you? Otherwise,
I think it's a stumbling block. Otherwise, if you're going to record and never listen to yourself, because the danger is it doesn't quite sound the way you want it to. And if it's just a case of it's just a little bit cringy to listen to yourself versus that, it going out to thousands of people and it isn't what you wanted it to be, I think it's worth making that little bit of a sacrifice. Just listen to the cringe.
Yeah, get over the cringe.
Get over yourself.
Tell me about that process then of working with an editor. So you record it, and then do you send your editor like the little time, like saying just remove that bit, take that bit out? Is that do you do that?
It's all very scheduled. So I have an editor and someone that does my social media, and now I've got someone that does my transcriptions as well. And so we have a schedule that says the date by which I'm going to record an episode by, and I batch everything. So I generally work in batches of 3 because I find it helps so much more with my creativity. It helps with my productivity, and I feel like I'm far more efficient. Because once I'm in the flow of writing an episode, thinking through what is it the legacy fundraiser really needs to know, how is this going to be meaningful to their role? I just don't want to stop writing, really. So so I write in a batch, I record in a batch of 3, and then I send instructions to the editor on kind of what I want taking in, taking out, and just maybe a little bit of fading here and there. And sometimes if there's a little bit of an echo, I haven't quite worked out why that is. And so then that goes to my editing team, one person actually. I don't make it as a whole production team. She'll be delighted she's got a team now. She hasn't, if you're listening, Charlotte. You haven't got a team, it's just you, unfortunately, still. So she'll do the editing, and then she's so nailed it now. We just get it right first time, sends it back to me, and then I send it to my social media support, who then puts it out on the platforms, and it just schedules it and just makes it so much easier. And it just helps me so much when I'm out at a client meeting, or I need to really get down and do focus work. I don't have to be thinking, right, I'm supposed to release an episode today because somebody else has gone ahead and already scheduled it. And that's great.
That's also how you start building consistency, isn't it? Because you're showing up for your audience, your listener, every 2 weeks, and that consistency breeds familiarity. Oh, I said it. We can never say that word.
Like
familiarity, and therefore professionalism, and people keep coming back for these bite-sized bits of advice on legacy fundraising. Now, is that only possible because you've got outside help, do you think?
No, I could do it all myself, but for me, the podcast, like you say, it's something on the side. As much as I love doing it, I am a legacy fundraiser at heart, and I want to spend as much time as possible doing legacy fundraising for my clients, and I want to do as much training as time allows, and I want to give as much as I can. So I guess it's about balance, and what having that support does, it frees up so much of my time, so I can be that consultant that turns up, as you're like saying. But yes, I think it would be hard, probably, with the amount that I want to do in my consultancy, to do everything myself. But that isn't to say somebody can't. They could reduce the frequency of which they put podcasts out. They don't have to have something as polished as I want it to be. But for me, if I'm going to do something, I have to do it absolutely well.
Yeah.
They don't have to have the social media assets as I do.
What sort of assets do you have? So
my social media support, she creates a social media tile. So I don't know if you've got it. So on my website, if somebody goes onto our website, they'll see it's got the name of the episode and the title, and she creates that, and she creates a sound clip via another platform, which is a headliner.
Yeah.
And what that does, it gives people a little bit of an insight as to what the episode's going to be about, and then they can decide whether that's right for them or not. And that for me is quite important, in that nobody wants to get halfway through an episode and realize actually that isn't kind of what I thought it was going to be. Well, hopefully the title would give it away as to what it's going to be. But that's another way of kind of, I guess, reaching more people and giving people a little bit of a snippet, whether that platform, the episodes are right for them or not.
And just on a bit of the content of the podcast, then, you don't always have guests, do you?
No, I love guests. But for me, when I did that brainstorm session, those 50 episodes were based on what was in my head. And what I decided was guests would help to make a point about some of the things that I wanted to share and get across. So I'm not the only voice of authority in legacy fundraising. There are some amazing legacy consultants out there as well. And that's why I will bring them on also for that, sometimes that counter argument maybe, or I don't necessarily need everyone to agree with me, but also there's so many people that I've worked with that I think it's helpful for me to put these guests in front of people. For example, I've done a lot of telemarketing. I mean, I started telemarketing in 2012 when nobody used the phone for legacies at all. It was completely, alien concept. It was unheard of. And the charity at the time were really nervous, but, we managed to work through that and got amazing results and continue to get amazing results. So rather than me just saying this, I thought, well, let me bring this agency on and we can talk about how we've worked together. So it feels as if it's more of a real thing. And I think where a guest can really enhance a particular topic, that's where I'll bring the guests on. So I don't have guests on just for the sake of it because they're high profile or they're going to get me more listeners. I have them on because I feel that there's a message I want to get across. And maybe there's someone else that can help to bring that message closer. Because it may not be always my voice they want to hear.
Yeah.
So I guess that really helps in terms of why I have guests and why I have certain guests.
I like the fact that you're not pressurizing yourself to have a guest every week. So I think, again, another stumbling block is that you feel like, oh, I've got to have someone, I constantly my voice, but I like how you're, I suppose, confident enough to be like, I can talk about this, I can hold my own.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I don't have to have guests, but I'm thinking about the listener and I'm thinking about the fundraiser. And I'm thinking, if I was the fundraiser, would I actually want to hear from, for example, I did an episode with a couple of free will services. So rather than just having one, I had a couple on there because I'm not leaning towards particular any service, and I don't have, I don't get commission on any of these at all. So I want to be able to show to a fundraiser what's available out there for me, and then for them to make the decision what's right. And I really don't want to direct anybody's kind of program in that way and be very much, you should do this. It's like, here are the options, find what works for you. So I think for that reason, that's where the guests are brilliant, because they can really help the listener and provide a service.
I'm quietly reconsidering putting these on Tuesdays now because it's bin day, and the bin men have come right outside my house. So if anyone can hear that sound, it's the bin men. It's all real, isn't it, in podcast world?
Yeah.
Just a reminder, if people are listening, if you want to put your questions to Sanita for the last 5 minutes of this chat, then please do so in the comments box wherever you are listening or watching this Grab the Mic live. Now, let's talk about plans for the future and how you're doing. I want to ask you, so how is the podcast doing? How many listeners are you getting?
Oh, that question. Oh, I don't know how many times I've been asked that. So we are laughing about this because I am anyone that knows me, I'm very data orientated. I really want to delve into charities database, how many people are of a certain age, and where's the data, what's the stats, and I've not looked. So for my podcast, I have deliberately, and it is so hard not to. And I do have people pinging me emails, telling me where I am in the charts. I mean, at one point I was number 14 in the Apple podcast for marketing, which is amazing.
That's nuts.
And that just put an amount of pressure on me. And that's why I haven't looked, because I want to always remember why I'm doing this. So whether there are 50 people listening or whether there's 5,000, 500,000, does not matter to me. If I am helping a listener to direct their program and ultimately help their charity to deliver vital work, I have done my job in terms of the podcast. I'm not interested in being famous. I'm not interested in kind of saying, oh, let's have a whole party because I've got this many listeners. So that's partly why I haven't listened, because one, it doesn't matter to me. The fact that people are reaching out to me and telling me that they're listening, and I hear from so and so said, oh, so and so recommended your podcast to me, but that's the other person that's actually listening hasn't actually reached out, which is really quite interesting how it works. So yes, it's really for me about quality rather than chasing the numbers.
I think that's a really great example of setting your own expectations and the reasons why you want to get into it. Before, you said at the beginning that you've got clients who've changed their whole strategy from listening to your podcast. You again have people who get in contact saying they really enjoy it. So thinking about your measures of success, by not looking at your listeners, that's not become a measure of success for you. I don't know how you're doing it though, because I am literally obsessed with podcast stats, and I will check them every day and refresh them.
It's very, very hard.
So when's the date that you're going to look at your stats then?
My social media person, we were talking about the 1st of November. So
oh wow,
it's going to be soon. But now I'm contemplating how much does it actually matter, and maybe give it a bit more time. So now I've kind of gone, oh, maybe I never want to know. Does it really matter? And I'm just wondering, what would I change as a result of the number anyway? I mean, if I'm now number 3 in the charts, whoopee-doo, but actually am I changing? Am I making a difference is the thing, and the number doesn't tell me that. It's like the number on the scale when you weigh yourself. It doesn't tell you anything, does it? It's just a number. It doesn't tell you if you're healthy or not. It doesn't tell you if you're actually getting healthier, and it doesn't tell me if I'm getting necessarily better.
What a great little quote to take out of this. I love it. We talked last week with Children's University Live about stats as well, and they said if we're reaching the right people and if we're making a difference, then the numbers don't matter.
Yeah.
Now there'll be people watching this back on YouTube and potentially on that podcast. Have you got any advice for someone that is looking to start a podcast, especially in our little sector?
Yeah, I think it's what we did in the beginning, or what you did with me. You actually just were very direct and said, Sanita, why? Why do you want to do this? Get absolutely clear about the why, because the why will be the driver as to whether you will get up on a Saturday morning and write your podcast or record your podcast, or want to edit your podcast on a Friday night when everyone else is having a good time. And it isn't to say you can't have a life, but I think it's about, you're going to have to do things when you don't want to necessarily do them at a time where it may not be fitting in with other things, because it is a commitment, and there's no doubt about that. And I think while someone's trying to find their feet, they will find that they're really short of time. I have now, opened up so much space, whereas in the beginning it was very concentrated because I was learning, and now I've got quicker at recording, and we've got quicker with editing, we've got quicker with everything in terms of the whole production. So the why was what I really got across from you, and that's what I continue with, because I am very structured, and I just remind myself, why am I doing this? And I don't need much more than that. I just remind myself that people are going to benefit from me having recorded this podcast, and I can't not show up for a fortnight. And you'd ask me, am I going to do seasons? Am I going to take a break? There is no break. Even over the Christmas period, you're going to have an episode. And because I've made that absolute commitment to myself and to my audience. Everybody else might be on holiday, but they can listen back. Okay. So I think that's absolutely key. And what the other thing I think is get help. I definitely would not have a podcast without you, Vic. There's no doubt about you. Vic hasn't told me to say that, by the way.
Oh, that's really kind of you.
But that is the absolute truth, because I would have dillied and dallied, and I would have gone, I've got too much work. Why do I need to be doing a podcast? That's something for later, and maybe I'll do it maybe I'll find another bunch of legacy fundraisers who want to do this. And so I think getting the help, getting the thinking, because it's almost a mirror reflection, and that's what I felt that you were. I had stuff in my head that I needed to get out. And only somebody who's been through this process, and you've done it multiple times, and you've set up so many podcasts. It's only someone that has set up a podcast that can help. I mean, you can talk to your partner, you can talk to, but actually, if they haven't gone through the process, they cannot help. That's my absolute, because I talked to so many people, and they were like, yes, you need to go and do it. I'm thinking, yeah, but what do you know? What headphones should I buy? What should I? And I think the other thing is love it. Absolutely love it. If you don't love it, if the thought of recording doesn't excite, so you can tell I'm very excited. If the thought of, I'm so over my own voice that I'll happily listen to all my podcasts. I mean, like I said, I listen to lots of podcasts on my phone. And I've got my own podcast on my phone because I need to make sure the episodes are going out. And occasionally I have had a listen. and that's because I love it. I love what I'm doing. And I think that what I'm producing is quality. And that's such an important point. It has to be your absolute passion to want to kind of like do it. And I guess the other thing is be honest about time. How much time can you actually dedicate to it? Because I think one of the things that we talked about, because I'd said I never wanted to be one of these one-hit wonder podcasters where you get listening to a podcast and 7 episodes in, they've disappeared. And I think all the things that we've talked about, all the things you taught me, has stopped me being that one-hit wonder podcaster. You know, the Chesney Hawks. I didn't want to be a Chesney Hawks of the podcasting world.
Some brilliant tips there. So 1, commit yourself from the very outset and be realistic about the time that you're going to spend on it. Number 2, consistency. Be consistent. 3, get help.
Yeah, definitely.
4, bloody love it. Because if you don't love it, it's going to become one of them things that you're like, oh, God, do a podcast this way. Or and all those things will ensure that you do not become the Chesney Hawks of podcasting land.
That's a new one, isn't it? Yeah.
Another quote I'm going to pull from this, from a little
You're welcome. Medias. You're welcome.
Sanita, thank you so much for joining me and everyone for the second Grab the Mic Live conversation. Being so helpful, so many little nuggets of advice, and this whole thing will be available on Catch Up on YouTube in the next couple of weeks' time. And then also you can find out more about what we do on Mike Media by going to mikemedia.co.uk or following our page on Twitter or LinkedIn. Just search Mike Media UK, and that's MIC, not like some dude called Mike. It's short for microphone. And next week, this is what is happening. We are going to be, well, not next week, next month. On the Tuesday, the 18th of October, we are welcoming Made by Immortals, who make the British Podcast Award-winning Armchair Adventures Kids podcast, and they're going to be talking to me about how they answered a global need, answered a local need, and it turned into global recognition. If you've enjoyed watching this, do me one favor, will you share it with someone who you think will need, love, and want it? From me and Sanita, thank you very much, and we will see you next month. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.